Hi everyone, good morning. So I thought today I'm going to do my John Maxwell later. I thought today what I would do is to focus on a section for spiritual direction. And I'm looking at a moment of loving concern. So the chapter of the blind Bartimaeus, I was reflecting on that and I thought, how would I feel if I was the one sitting by the side of the road and asking Jesus for mercy, asking for healing? And I know that he's walking past because I can hear the footsteps and I can hear people talking to him, and he's just ignoring me. He's just carrying on walking. And what is going through Jesus when he hears me calling after him, but he's not helping me? He's just carrying on walking, and he's put his back towards me, and he's continuing on his journey. And I'm shouting even louder and even louder for him to have mercy on me, and he's not having any mercy. And then when he turns back and he heals me, like blind Bartimaeus, do I follow him on that path immediately and say, thank you for healing me? Or do I say thank you to him and go back to my home and go back to my life? Often in the Bible, the sicknesses or illnesses, things like that, they're looked on as a punishment for family turning away from God or for sins committed in community. Sometimes it's not the sins of our family, but it could be things that corporations have done. For example, when they put infected blood into people in the UK, in England, that's a sin. They did it intentionally. They know that they did wrong. It's the corruption of the banks with their LOL culture and rejoicing. There were a lot of people who were happy when I left TD in 2007. My executive was sad, but there were a lot of people who were like, good, she's gone. So those are questions we can reflect on, we can think of. We can take that passage and put ourselves in it. And we can do it as the blind Bartimaeus, or we can picture ourselves as part of the crowd that's watching the scene unfolding. We can do it putting ourselves in Jesus's role and choosing to walk away when there's people asking for our help and just continuing on that journey. And just see what comes up for us in our prayer. It's a powerful way of praying, of putting yourself in the scriptures and picking a role for yourself, and then praying with whatever emotions come out of that, whatever feelings come out of that, and then journaling on that. And that image of loving concern, of Jesus's loving concern, that makes him turn around and heal, and makes him turn around and not just heal but cure, to restore sight. And it doesn't tell us how he did it, but he restores sight. And many of the ways of healing, sometimes people pray over people and healings happen, not like the charlatans today, but there are records of it. There are healings that take place in different ways, and we are not told how Jesus did that healing, but the people of the culture of the time would have known how he did that healing. So you can take that moment of loving concern, and be content in it, whether you are rich or whether you are poor in material wealth, whether you are honored or dishonored, whether you have the experience of somebody who's had a long life, or your life is still unfolding, your life is still short. And when we have our attitudes in service of God and in service of God's life, God's love for us, very little can sway us. There's very little that can sway us. And you can take any example of who you want to take. You can take an artist, you can take a singer, you can take whoever you want and look at their life and look at what has swayed their faith. Has something swayed their faith or not? And so for me, when I watched that Elvis movie, I was very sad at how they portrayed him at the end, because they portrayed his life as an unsuccessful life, as a tragic life, as a broken life. But for me, he was never that. Even as a child, he was never that. Those were the headlines. Those were the sensationalist headlines to sell the newspapers. But for me, his life was a success because he got married, he had a family, he did what he loved with passion. Yes, he had corrupt people around him, and he was forced into situations, even by his own family, where he was put into drugs. But unless you're in that person's shoes, you don't know the decisions that you're going to make. At least that's how I look at it. And for me, his life was a success because even with his divorce, he did what was going to lead to the best outcome for him and his family. You can't force anybody to love you, and you can't force anybody to stay with you when they don't want to. And that's a lesson I had to learn in my own life with my mother, because I wanted my mother to stay with me, and I had looked forward to her coming here to Canada from Zimbabwe. I sponsored her. I took on the responsibility. I went and met with the MPs. I wrote to the MPs. I went alone to meet with Mr. Volpe. Nobody came with me. Everybody is very good at ordering me about and dictating to me what I should do with my life. But nobody was there with me. And when she came and she chose to live with my sister, I was heartbroken. And everyone said to me, well, you should put your mother's life first. And she's been through a lot, so you have to deal with it and get on with your own life. And so I had to learn to be content in that. I had to learn to be content with the disappointment. I had to learn to be content with broken dreams, with broken goals. Even when I lost my place, I had bought my place for myself and my mother. So even when I lost my place, that was a big disappointment. I signed the papers on her birthday when I bought my place. And when I sold my place, it was on the date that my dad died, 15th of February. And then I moved in here to where I'm living now. So you can say, oh, it's coincidence. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But what do you deem as a successful life? Is it not walking justly with the Lord, loving tenderly, and bringing about justice in this world? And for me, that's what Elvis Presley did. From what I've read and from what I've seen and from what I remember as a child growing up, he was a generous man, and he was a kind man, and he was somebody who was fun-loving, but he was also very serious about his music, about the way he presented things, about his dress, about the materials he chose. And if you can live your life that way and get to the end of your life and make your work sacred, is that not a successful life? For me, that movie was very upsetting at the end. I was weeping. I was like, this is such a tragic life. I think it could have been portrayed differently, the Elvis movie. But I focused on different things about his life. And so for me, his life was a success. If it wasn't a success, we wouldn't remember him for his music, for his human rights work, for his funding for cancer, for all the ways he touched our hearts, and for all the ways that he promoted women in his music, in his films, and the freedom of choice for women. He didn't force anybody to stay with him. So I think you can take that. At least that's how I do my spiritual direction. I make it about the present. I make it about the everyday things in my life when I meet with people. And it detaches you from self-centeredness, because a lot of people have said to me, including my mother, put yourself first. And for somebody that has grown up putting others first, it's not that easy. But I'm learning to do it, and I'm getting there. And nobody knows the future. And it's not that we give up caring about creation or threats to our life. We don't do that. But we choose to be faithful to God instead of unfaithful to God, and being unfaithful to Him in even the slightest way. I don't understand how people here think. I don't understand how the banks could promote corruption for so long in the name of profits. And I don't understand why somebody like me, who does everything right, can't get a good job. And I'm always being let go because other people make mistakes, or other people have tempers, or other people feel they have the right to abuse me and take their frustrations out on me. I don't understand how people think like that here. But that's what gets promoted in North America. And it's not about empathy. If somebody is sick and if somebody's in the hospital, yes, I can have empathy and I can have compassion. But with the way they go off on us, especially me, and it's like I'm a punching bag for them. And people say to me, well, you have to accept it. How many more people have to get hurt, and how many more countries have to fail before this ideology changes? Because Oscar Romero should not have been shot on that altar. That's a tragedy. That is a tragedy. But Elvis's life was in no way a tragedy. It was a success in every way. For me, that's about how the faith is lived.